Sales Wisdom podcast. Today with us with Ben Gould, undrafted NBA agent. We're going to talk about that. He's content creator at Scratchpad and brain slash face at Corporate Bro, which is a company I discovered not so long ago. I really love their wedding video. There was the Corporate Bro there, trying to network itself in or out, depending on your point of view out of that wedding. So that was beautiful. And we have Ben Gould today with us. Quite an eclectic background, which we're going to cover. Ben, can you try to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your sales slash business activities?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Charles. It's a pleasure to be here. I started, I guess, my professional career from Boston originally, moved to San Francisco and got into tech sales, worked at a few different startups, and during that time began creating content on my own, podcasts and writing, mainly comedy and short stories, and got involved with Corporate Bro, which you mentioned, which is a kind of satirical, comedic um, social media account on Instagram and TikTok and so forth that pokes fun at tech sales in Silicon Valley. It was started by Ross Pomerantz, who is Corporate Bro. And it's basically me and him coming up with sketches. So we do that basically every weekend. We'll film sketches and put new ones out, like that wedding one recently. And I think it was 6 years ago this summer when I first started working with Ross. And just recently, a month ago, we released our TV show, um, SAD, which stands for Sales Are Dope. And so that's one thing we've been working towards for the last 3-4 years. And we're really excited to have it out in the world. And yeah, so basically I'm a former salesperson turned content person and specializing in writing comedy and making videos and podcasts and whatnot.
Okay, so I'll pick and choose some of your experiences that are very interesting. So, counterfeit unit intern for Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. And then, yeah, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, in which you were analyzing calls from jails. Let's start just for the first one, because yeah, like the second one also blew my brain. Like, why did you started your career protecting these people and like having armored cars and limousines handled? Tell us about that one. Let's start with that.
Yeah, and I guess these were even before my tech sales days. So, as you said on the top, I'm an undrafted NBA free agent. That's what I like to call myself. I grew up wanting to be in the NBA, wanting to be a basketball player. Prayed every day that I'd be 6'6", bald and black like Michael Jordan. Turned out 5'9", white, full head of hair, and kind of realized that the NBA dream was not going to happen. And so I pivoted into wanting to be basically a secret agent. And so in college, I had some internships that were really interesting. The Secret Service one um, was really interesting. And we have a family friend who was in the Secret Service and helped me get the internship in the Boston office. And what people think of when they think of the Secret Service is protecting the president, but they also are in charge with any counterfeit crimes in the country. And so a lot of what we did was analyze fake dollar bills, or maybe they weren't fake, maybe they were fake. And so for a time, I was an expert on holding a dollar bill up to a light and seeing if the threads are accurate and the numbers match up with the banks, and recording all of that information. It was a pretty menial task, which a lot of Secret Service tasks are, but the most exciting parts were we did get to, on my first day, meet Barack Obama. So he was coming to Boston to vacation in Martha's Vineyard. And so we were riding in the cars with the motorcade, got to shake his hand, which was like an incredible kind of experience. I had my phone up ready to record it, and he shook my hand and was like, "It's a pleasure to meet you today." And I was like, "Meet me? Like, it's a pleasure for me to meet. This isn't a pleasure for you." But it was kind of a out of body experience. And rode in another motorcade for Michelle Obama, guns hanging out of the back of the SUV and everything. And that was really cool experience. They're all really nice people over there. And then the next year was kind of a continuation of that. I was interning at the Suffolk County DA's office, district attorney's office. And so I was assigned to this unit that was the major felony unit. So they were just a level below homicide and kind of the big drug trafficking units, but they handled, armed robberies and burglaries and DUIs or manslaughter kind of cases. So still really interesting stuff. And it was up and coming lawyers and attorneys who were so impressive. And we got to watch them in the courtroom, make closing arguments and cross witnesses. And it was, I mean, it is like watching a TV show, when you see Law and Order and they're doing these like speeches at the end. Some of them are actually like that. And I remember case saw this woman make her closing argument, and she was just so much, it seemed like it was in the case, she made such a good case in the closing arguments. And we got back to the office and she was like, he got, it was a hung jury. He was free after that. And it's kind of like sales almost, because they are making these like prepared statements, but they're also reacting to these objections in real time, and they can do the most amazing job. And at the end of the day, it's up to a group of humans to say yes or no. And sometimes they say no, and you kind of just got to move on to the next case, and have that short memory. But it was a lot of the same skill sets that I think translate to sales. And eventually that career kind of
some kind of AI, I guess, would kind of do that nowadays, but it's kind of surprising that people are kind of shooting themselves in the foot in their jail communication. So how did you find out if someone was actually
oh
stealing,
yeah.
like, confidential information? Like, did you had hints, and how did you choose to focus on that part of the convo vs another one? And tell us like good stories about that.
Yeah, the jail calls was probably my favorite thing to do. I mean, a lot of what they had the interns doing were really menial tasks and paperwork and making copies, and I would mess it up all the time because it was just so boring for me. I like doing that kind of like organizational stuff was just really tough. And but the jail calls were always really interesting because I'm always so interested in kind of like the human aspect of the story and like who these people are. And you'd be surprised. I mean, you don't know. I'm sure it's more advanced now. I'm sure there's AI being like, he said this here, listen to this call. But back then it was like the lawyers hated to do them because you kind of just have to listen to everything. And they might say nothing, if you're in a conversation and they start talking about going to the grocery store or whatever, you're like, do I really have to listen to this? And you kind of just have to filter it all through and keep yourself interested in the conversation, because some of the time those simple conversations are coded as well, and the lawyers would tip us off if they say, taking the trash out, this might mean X, Y, or Z. So you would take notes during each of the jail calls, tell them if you thought, you heard something interesting, and then they would kind of go back and listen to it and say whether it was useful or not. So even though there's that warning when you're in jail and you call someone back home and say this call is being recorded, some of them will still say like they'll admit to crimes. And so when they're waiting for trial and that happens, the lawyers can say, think we need to go to trial anymore. He said this. So it's a great way for them as they're developing their case to kind of get just and trying to.
So that's the start, right? Which is a pretty epic start. And then you enter the sales world. You work at top companies like Yelp, which was somewhat in the, no, it wasn't in the early days, but it was still interesting times. Zenefits, which is a huge one, Himalaya, and then Bravado, like, because I want to get to corporate growth a bit quicker than potentially to Scratchpad if you have the time. But what did you learn from all these experiences in a TLDR fashion?
Yeah, Yelp was where I learned everything as far as sales goes. It was really getting thrown into the fire quickly. You're with some people who are, everyone's really young. My manager was actually, I just learned this, my manager was actually a couple months younger than me, and she was managing a team of 10. But you really, if you're on a closing call and you might not close, you can, like, they'll take over the headset and kind of develop in your old call said no to someone else 3 months earlier. And so you really have to, it's really where I learned how to develop that thick skin, not take things personally, and push people to close. There were one call closes that happening every day. And it was a huge grind. Unless you're really, even if you're really, really killing it, a lot of people, the majority of people were not having fun there. It was a really tough sales kind of environment, but it was that, Wolf of Wall Street, just rows of teens and a big gong whenever anybody closed, and it's loud. And then Zenefits, I went there and it had more of a kind of, I want to say, family vibe because everyone was so tight. Although I came after, they had their meteoric rise and then they had to fire 500 people. I joined, and then 3 months after I joined, they fired another 500 people. So the vibes were always kind of like in recovery mode at all times, I would say. And it was a little bit more friendly of a sale to people. It kind of felt like you weren't, you were actually offering something that everyone uses, everyone like needs, payroll, HR services. And there were some really, really talented salespeople that I learned from there. So, uh, I think the biggest thing, more talented than I was, and sitting next to them and learning what makes them tick, what makes the top performers tick. And all of these experiences really led into creating content for Corporate Bro because, living it, you get the experiences, you feel the pain, you feel the different emotions, and then that gives you the idea for, oh, let's film this sketch here. This is the type of salesperson that would say this. And so all of those experiences directly led to, all of the content that we make.
I want to get to that, but just before we do, tell us about like Himalaya and Sound Made Public. I obviously do this podcasting thing. I think it's one of the most interesting channels. You learn from people, you get to talk, you get insights, you get audiences to listen. So it's win-win-win-win type of deal. What have what podcast insights have you got from your two experiences there? And then let's get to corporate growth.
Yeah, I think Himalaya, that was the first time I kind of got out of, I had done a podcasting kind of production crash course at Berkeley, which was really great. Learned a lot. You know, it was really, really great, like well worth it. And kind of helped pay for some of it. And went to Himalaya, and Himalaya was like kind of a wacky company. They actually lied about their funding. They said they had like $100 million in funding, and a year later, Axios reported that that wasn't true, and they just kind of kept going. They were trying to be their own podcast platform, but I would say there was still some awesome people that I got to work with and learn from there, and met so many different podcasters. And got to see kind of what the business side of podcasting is all about. And then from there went to sound, became kind of a freelance contractor, and Sound Made Public was kind of where I learned more about makes a great podcast. And they're a husband and wife tag team. He's like a designer. She's an interviewer and former journalist, or is a journalist, and they're incredibly kind, based in San Francisco. And I was helping them we've developed a podcast for Robinhood with Vlad Zenev, I forget the CEO's name, and a few, and GitHub as well, and one other company. And they kind of introduced like really what goes into the sound design, what goes into the background research on, your guests, and how to really create a podcast from scratch with the marketing, the design, everything. And they were just really, really thoughtful, really talented, really smart, and loved my time working for them and learning from them. They always produced like really great content.
Well, and for corporate growth, like your skids, your ideas, do they just come naturally? Do you have a process for it? Is it like an idea and then you actually develop a script? Tell us a bit more about your process there, and tell us why humor is probably the future and the present of content.
Yeah, did you say why humor is the future and present of
Right.
content? I
Yes.
think you might have cut out for a second.
Still there, Ben? Are we back?
Yeah, I think I heard the end of your question, but it came in a little delayed.
Right.
Was
And
it
so I was
after
asking
Sound
you,
Made Public? Was it about like creating humor with
right.
content, and why that's kind of like the future?
Yeah, first, what's the playbook? What's the process like of the ideas and execution? And also tell us like why humor might be the present and the future um, of content.
Yeah, I think the reason why, part of it's just because I think that's kind of the only content that I can do is humor. Is one reason why I do it. Like even when I first started, writing, when I tried to write stuff that was like serious, it just came across as corny or disingenuous to myself. And so I think part of it's just you have to do what you're good at and what you're inclined to do. But I also think having humor lets you cut through kind of the noise of advertising and marketing. If you're trying to be serious and you're not acknowledging the fact that at a certain level you're trying to get someone to buy something from you, then it's kind of disingenuous in a certain way. It's a little bit inauthentic in a certain way. And so I think you see that, even in like superhero movies did not used to be funny, really. They used to be serious. And I think one reason why Marvel became so popular is because when they made the first Iron Man, it was legitimately funny. It had like legitimately funny parts. It was tongue in cheek, and Guardians of the Galaxy kind of does that same thing, and it audience because people didn't look at it as superhero movies anymore. It had more of a human element to it. And I think at the end of the day, all humor is like finding something that's familiar, that people can relate to, and flipping it on its head. And so if you can do that with, your product or your company, um, or do that with superheroes, like that's going to reach more people. And I think it's going to reach more people in a deeper way with a little bit more meaning. It doesn't always have to be funny, but I think that's like kind of the power of comedy and having humor with something is it just can make things more relatable and more humorous, and also, you know, lets you be a little less serious and have more fun. I think people are just drawn to that more than the alternative.
Yeah, especially in the corporate world, like it's everyone puts kind of a face, it's so weird. They put a mask and they go to work and they're not really their true authentic self. And I think that's really like the satire of corporate bro. And I do think it's gonna have a lot of success. I think that you guys hit a very specific niche as well, which makes you like the category king almost from day one. Is there like someone in that niche, but for entrepreneurship or just founders? Because I haven't found that someone yet.
I don't know. I mean, there's got to be. I'm sure there's someone on TikTok, and there's other forums, other people that are kind of similar to what we do. But I think, Corporate Natalie is one who is not necessarily sales, but I think it's easier for those creators and those people to do it from a, non-founder, non-entrepreneurial perspective, because it's just there's fewer of them, I guess, to begin with. So we haven't really found that, but maybe Corporate Bro needs to do a few more founder sketches,
Yeah,
and we can just
super
add it to our
interesting.
own repertoire.
If you guys don't do it, I think I'm
Yeah,
gonna have a try at it. And I think sales is such an interesting niche as well because sales tend to be quite serious as well, and they're so brutal. When you make cold calls and so forth, souls get destroyed and people get micro
yeah,
traumatized by sales. Like especially if you're hitting 200 phone calls a day, like I did when I started my career, and bringing some lighthearted humor is like, oh, dude, you actually understand me and my reality. So it's really a super niche, and thank you for what you guys are doing. It's quite fascinating and entertaining at the same time. uh Ben, can you tell us like where to find out more about you? Like pod's already over, we're gonna do a round two later on, but tell us a bit more where people can find out more about you guys.
yeah. You can find out more at if you just search "Sales Are Dope" on YouTube. You can watch our 8-episode show. It's full runtime of 88 minutes, so all the episodes are short. You can watch them pretty quickly in that playlist there on "Sales Are Dope" at YouTube. And you can also find us at Corporate Bro on Instagram, as well as Corporate Bro on TikTok, as well as Corporate Bro on LinkedIn. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Ben Gould if you want to search that.